My name is Jack, and I've been a long-haul trucker for over 10 years. Driving across the country is my life. The open road is my home, and my truck is my only companion. Most of the time, it's a lonely job, but I loved the freedom it brings. I've seen mountains, rivers, and cities, but nothing could prepare me for what I would encounter on that fateful night. It was late September, and I was making my way down Route 66. The sun had set, leaving the sky a deep shade of blue. I had just picked up a load in Chicago and was heading to Los Angeles. It was going to be a long drive, but I was used to it. The highway stretched out before me, illuminated by my headlights. The sound of the engine was comforting, and the hum of the tires on the asphalt was like a lullaby. I stopped at a rest area around midnight to grab a quick bite and fuel up. The air was chilly, and a thick fog rolled in, wrapping around the truck like a blanket. I filled up my tank and decided to grab a coffee. As I walked into the small convenience store, I noticed a few other truckers sitting at a table, talking quietly. They looked serious, their eyes darting towards the window. I tried to shake off the uneasy feeling that settled in my stomach. "Hey, Jack," one of the guys called out. His name was Mike, a friendly trucker I'd met a few times. "You heard about the hitchhiker, right?" I shook my head, pouring myself a cup of coffee. "What hitchhiker?" Mike leaned in closer, lowering his voice. "There's been a story going around about a woman who hitches rides along this stretch of road. She's supposed to be some kind of ghost or something. A few drivers have picked her up, but they all say strange things happened." I raised an eyebrow. "What kind of strange things?" "They say she has this haunting look in her eyes, like she's searching for something. And then, just as you're getting close to your destination, she vanishes. Like she was never there," Mike said, glancing at the window again. "Sounds like an urban legend to me," I said, trying to laugh it off. I've been on the road too long to believe in ghosts. But as I walked back to my truck, the fog seemed thicker. I felt a shiver run down my spine. I brushed it off, reminding myself that I had a job to do. I climbed into my truck, fired up the engine, and hit the road again. The weight of the cargo felt comforting as I merged back onto the highway. As I drove, the night grew darker. The headlights cut through the fog, but it seemed to wrap around me, almost suffocating. The radio played softly in the background, a mix of country songs and late-night talk shows. It was calming, and I found myself getting lost in thought. About an hour into my drive, I spotted something on the side of the road, a figure in a white dress, standing by the edge of the highway. My heart raced as I slowed down. I leaned forward, squinting to see better. It was a woman, her long hair hanging down, her face pale and illuminated by my headlights. I pulled over, my heart pounding. "This is crazy," I muttered to myself. "It's probably just a hitchhiker." As I rolled down the window, I caught a glimpse of her face. Her eyes were filled with sorrow, and her lips trembled as she spoke. "Can you give me a ride?" I hesitated, thinking about what Mike had said, but something in her voice made me feel sorry for her. "Sure, hop in." She climbed into the passenger seat and shut the door. "Thank you," she whispered, staring out into the fog. "Where are you headed?" I asked, trying to make small talk. "Just down the road," she replied, her gaze fixed on the darkness outside. I glanced at her, noting how pale she looked. "You okay? You seem a bit, oof." "I'm fine," she said softly, but I could hear the sadness in her voice. It made me uncomfortable, but I didn't want to push her. I turned on the radio, hoping to lighten the mood, but as the miles passed, the silence between us grew heavier. I stole glances at her, noticing the way her hands trembled in her lap. "Is everything all right?" I asked. "I just need to get to my family," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "They're waiting for me." I nodded, trying to be supportive. "Where are they?" "They live on the other side of the woods," she said, her eyes drifting back to the fog outside. I was about to ask more when the radio crackled. A voice broke through the static and I froze. Be careful on the road tonight, folks. There's been reports of strange occurrences out there. If you see a woman in white, do not pick her up. She's not what she seems, the voice warned. My heart dropped. I glanced at the woman beside me, her expression unreadable. Did you hear that? I asked, my voice trembling. Yes, she said, her voice low. But I have to get to them. They're waiting for me. I didn't know what to say. I wanted to help her, but a part of me felt a growing sense of dread. I pressed on, determined to reach my destination. The fog swirled around us, and I felt like I was driving into a nightmare. As we continued down the highway, I noticed the temperature dropping. The night felt colder, and the fog thickened. I turned the heater up, glancing at the woman. She stared out the window, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. Why are you out here alone? I asked softly, hoping to draw her out. I was looking for my family, she said, her voice barely audible over the sound of the engine. They've been gone for a long time. I frowned, not sure how to respond. Gone where? Gone from this world, she said, her eyes distant. I lost them in an accident. The realization hit me like a truck. You mean, you're… Yes, she said, her gaze still locked on the fog outside. I'm searching for them. I swallowed hard, my heart racing. What happened to you? There was an accident on this road years ago, she said, her voice trembling. I was in the car with my husband and daughter. We were driving home when we crashed. They didn't survive. I felt a chill run down my spine. And you're stuck here? Yes, she whispered. I've been trying to find them ever since. I thought if I could find someone to help me, maybe I could finally move on. I was speechless. I wanted to turn the truck around, to get away from her and the darkness that surrounded us, but something kept me there, listening to her story. Do you know where they are? I asked cautiously. Just down the road, she said, pointing ahead. There's a clearing, that's where they are. I glanced at the road ahead, feeling a sense of dread wash over me. The fog was thickening, making it hard to see. I don't know, it seems dangerous. I need to see them, she said, her voice rising with desperation. Please, just take me there. I took a deep breath, torn between fear and compassion. All right, I said, reluctantly pushing the accelerator. But I'm not staying long. As we drove, the fog thickened even more. It felt like we were driving through a tunnel of white, the headlights barely cutting through. I could feel my heart racing as anxiety coursed through my veins. Are we close? I asked, trying to break the silence. Yes, she said softly, just a little further. After what felt like an eternity, I finally saw a faint light ahead. As we approached, I realized it was a clearing surrounded by tall trees. I pulled over, my heart pounding. This is it, she said, her eyes lighting up. I got out of the truck, the cold air biting at my skin. The clearing was eerily quiet, the only sound the rustle of leaves in the wind. I felt a deep sense of unease, but I couldn't turn back now. Where are they? I asked, scanning the area. She pointed towards the trees, her expression filled with longing. They're just beyond the trees. Please, I need to go. I hesitated, feeling a chill in the air. I'll wait here, I said, taking a step back. But before I could turn around, she grabbed my arm. Please, you have to help me. Her grip was cold, sending a shiver down my spine. I pulled away, feeling a sense of dread. I can't, I said, stepping back. Please, she pleaded, her eyes glistening with tears. I need to find them. I stood there, frozen, as she moved toward the trees. Wait, I called after her, but she didn't turn back. I felt panic rising in my chest. What are you doing? I shouted, but she was already moving into the shadows. I stumbled into the trees, fear gripping my heart. The darkness was thick, the branches clawing at me as I pushed through. Where are you? I called, but all I could hear was the rustling of leaves and the pounding of my heart. Suddenly, I saw a faint light ahead. I rushed toward it, desperate to find her. As I stepped into a small clearing, I gasped. There, in the middle of the clearing, was a family, her family. A man and a little girl stood together, their faces pale and lifeless. "Mommy," the girl cried, reaching out. I stumbled back, horrified. "No, this can't be happening," I shouted. The woman stepped forward, her eyes locked on her family. "I've finally found you," she cried, tears streaming down her face. But as she reached out, the ground beneath me began to tremble. Shadows crept from the trees, swirling around her. I felt an overwhelming sense of dread as I realized what was happening. "No, get away from her!" I screamed, lunging forward, but it was too late. The shadows enveloped her, and she screamed, "Help me! Don't let them take me!" I could feel the darkness closing in on me. "Run!" I shouted, but my legs felt heavy. The shadows reached for me, pulling me closer to the chaos. The man and girl began to fade, their faces twisted in pain. I stumbled back, trying to escape the darkness, but it was too strong. "Jack!" I heard the woman scream, her voice filled with terror. "Help me!" I fought against the shadows, clawing my way back to the edge of the clearing. I couldn't let them take her, but as I reached the trees, I felt a hand grip my wrist. I turned to see the woman's face twisted in anguish. "Help me," she begged, but the shadows pulled her away, dragging her into the darkness. "No!" I yelled, breaking free from her grip. I turned and ran, fear driving me back toward my truck. I burst through the trees, gasping for breath. The fog swirled around me, and I could hear the whispers growing louder, echoing in my mind. "Join us." I jumped into my truck, slamming the door shut. I fumbled with the keys, my hands shaking as I turned the ignition. The engine roared to life, and I peeled away from the clearing, not daring to look back. I drove for miles, my heart racing. The road felt endless, the shadows chasing me in my mind. I could still hear her screams echoing in my ears. The woman in white haunted my thoughts, her eyes filled with despair. After what felt like hours, I finally found a small diner off the highway. I pulled in, desperate to escape the memories of what I had witnessed. I stepped inside, the bell above the door ringing as I entered. The diner was empty except for the waitress, who looked up at me with concern. "You all right, hun?" she asked, her voice soft. I shook my head, feeling the weight of exhaustion settle in. I saw something on the road." "What do you mean?" she asked, wiping her hands on her apron. "I picked up a hitchhiker," I said, my voice trembling. "But she was a ghost. I think she was searching for her family." The waitress frowned, leaning in closer. "You're not the first to say that. This road has its share of stories. Some say, if you pick up a woman in white, she'll lead you to your doom." I swallowed hard, the memories flooding back. It was real, I swear it was real. "Maybe you should get some coffee and take a break," she suggested. "It can be tough out there, especially at night." I nodded, grateful for her kindness. I took a seat at the counter, my hands shaking as I held the coffee cup. The warmth was comforting, but it couldn't chase away the chill that lingered in my bones. As I sat there, I couldn't help but wonder about the woman. Was she still out there, lost in the fog? I thought about her family and the desperation in her voice. I should have done more to help her. After a while, the waitress returned. "You okay?" she asked, concern etched on her face. "I don't know," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I can't stop thinking about her. Sometimes the road takes a toll on us," she said softly. "You can't save everyone, Jack. Some stories just end in darkness." I nodded, but her words did little to ease my guilt. I finished my coffee and stood up, feeling a sense of determination. I couldn't let this end without trying to help. "I need to go back," I said, surprising even myself. The waitress looked at me, worry etched on her face. "You sure that's a good idea?" "I have to," I replied. "I can't just leave her like that." She sighed, shaking her head. "Just be careful out there. The shadows can be deceiving." I thanked her and left the diner, climbing back into my truck. The fog still clung to the road, but I felt a sense of resolve. I had to go back to that clearing. I drove back down the highway, my heart pounding as I approached the spot where I had picked her up. The memories of the clearing flooded back, but I couldn't turn back now. I had to find her. As I pulled over at the edge of the road, I turned off the engine. The silence was deafening, and I could feel the weight of the fog pressing in around me. I took a deep breath and stepped out of the truck, my heart racing. "Hello?" I called out, my voice trembling. "Is anyone there?" The fog swallowed my words and I felt a chill in the air. I moved towards the clearing, the trees looming around me. The darkness felt alive, pulsing with an energy I couldn't explain. "Please," I shouted, my voice echoing through the night. "If you can hear me, I want to help." For a moment, there was silence. Then from the shadows I heard a faint whisper, "Help us." My heart raced as I stumbled forward, drawn to the sound. "Where are you?" I called out. The fog shifted, and I caught a glimpse of a figure standing in the distance. It was the woman, her face pale and filled with sorrow. "I'm here," I shouted, rushing towards her. "Please help me," she cried, her voice filled with desperation. "I'm here," I said, reaching for her. "I want to help you find your family." She stepped forward, her eyes locking onto mine. "You have to believe me. They're waiting for me." I nodded, determination flooding through me. "Let's go. I'll help you." As I led her back towards the clearing, I could feel the shadows closing in around us. "Stay close," I urged, my heart racing. We stepped into the clearing, the air thick with tension. I could see the faint outline of her family ahead, standing together in the darkness. "There they are," she exclaimed, her voice filled with hope. But as we approached, I felt a wave of darkness wash over me. The shadows began to swirl, reaching for her. "No," I shouted, trying to pull her back. "Help me." She screamed, her eyes wide with terror. I could feel the shadows pulling me in, but I refused to let go. "I won't let them take you," I shouted, grabbing her hand tightly. With all my strength, I pulled her away from the darkness. "Come on," I urged, dragging her back towards the edge of the clearing. The shadows howled in fury, but we pushed through, the light from the truck shining like a beacon. "We can make it," I shouted, determination flooding my veins. As we reached the edge, I felt the shadows lurch back, unable to follow us into the light. We stumbled onto the road, gasping for breath. "I did it," she whispered, her eyes filled with disbelief. "I'm free." I looked back at the clearing, feeling the weight of the shadows lifting. "You're safe now," I said, my heart racing. "Thank you," she said, tears streaming down her face. "You saved me." As she stood there, her figure began to fade. "Wait," I cried, panic rising in my chest. "It's okay," she said softly, her voice filled with warmth. "I can finally be with my family. Please don't go," I pleaded, but she smiled gently. "You helped me find my peace. Thank you." And with that, she vanished into the night, leaving only the sound of the wind in her wake. I stood there, heart racing, overwhelmed by what had just happened. The shadows were gone, and the fog began to lift. I climbed back into my truck, still in shock. As I drove away from that stretch of road, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease, but I also felt a sense of peace. I had helped her find her family, and in doing so, I had faced the darkness that haunted the highway. From that night on, I became more than just a trucker. I became a guardian of the road, watching out for those lost in the fog. I still drive through the night, but now I carry her memory with me. Every time I pass that stretch of highway, I feel her presence, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, there is hope. The road is filled with stories, and I'm determined to be the one who listens. So if you ever find yourself driving late at night, be careful on the road. You never know who or what might be waiting in the shadows. My name is Sam, and I'm a truck driver. I've been driving for years, crisscrossing the country, delivering everything from groceries to industrial equipment. The road has become my second home, and my truck is my sanctuary. But not all my journeys have been peaceful. One autumn night, I was hauling a load of fresh produce from California to a small town in Texas. The sky was clear, and the stars twinkled like diamonds above me. I felt good that night, cruising down the highway with my favorite country music playing softly on the radio. Around midnight, I decided to stop at a rest area to stretch my legs and grab a coffee. I parked my rig under a flickering streetlight and got out. The air was cool and crisp, and a gentle breeze rustled the leaves on the trees. I walked over to the small restroom building, glancing around to see if any other truckers were around. I noticed a few cars parked nearby, but the place felt eerily quiet. I brushed it off, thinking it was just the late hour. After using the restroom, I headed to the vending machines for a cup of coffee. As I waited for it to brew, I heard a noise outside. It sounded like someone was crying. Curiosity piqued. I stepped outside to investigate. The sound was faint, but it was definitely coming from the direction of the woods bordering the rest area. "Hello?" I called out, my voice echoing in the stillness. The crying stopped, and a moment later, a figure emerged from the shadows. It was a young woman, her clothes tattered and dirty. She looked disheveled, her hair matted and her eyes wide with fear. "Please help me," she cried, her voice trembling. "I'm lost." I hesitated for a moment, remembering the stories I'd heard about hitchhikers and the dangers of picking up strangers. But something in her eyes, an unmistakable desperation, pulled at my heart. "What happened?" I asked, trying to stay calm. "I was camping with my friends, and I got separated from them," she explained, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I can't find my way back. I think something's out there." "Something?" I repeated, feeling a chill creep down my spine. "I don't know," she said, glancing nervously toward the trees. I heard noises. It didn't sound like anything I've ever heard before. I was so scared, I just ran. My instincts told me to turn around and get back in my truck. But I felt an overwhelming urge to help her. "All right, you can ride with me," I said. "I'm headed to Texas. We can find your friends along the way." Her face brightened with relief. Thank you so much." I led her back to my truck, and she climbed into the passenger seat. I handed her a blanket I kept in the back for cold nights. As I drove away from the rest area, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. "What's your name?" I asked, trying to ease the tension in the air. "Emily," she replied, wrapping the blanket around her shoulders. "I can't believe you stopped for me. Most people wouldn't." "I've been on the road a long time," I said. "You never know who might need help." As we drove, I tried to keep the conversation going, asking about her camping trip. She told me about her friends and their plans, but she seemed distant, glancing nervously out the window at the trees as if she expected something to leap out at us. The highway stretched on, the only sound the hum of the engine and the occasional crackle from the radio. I felt a growing sense of unease, but I brushed it aside, focusing on the road ahead. After about an hour of driving, I noticed that the fog had started to roll in, thick and heavy. The headlights cut through it like a knife, but the darkness felt suffocating. "Do you see that?" Emily whispered, her voice barely audible. I glanced around, squinting through the fog. "What?" "There's something back there," she said, her eyes wide with fear. "In the trees." I rolled my eyes, trying to shake off her fear. It's probably just an animal or something. The fog can play tricks on your mind. But deep down, I felt a shiver of doubt. I pressed the accelerator, eager to put some distance between us and the woods. As we drove, I began to notice strange things. Shadows flitted at the edges of my vision, but whenever I turned to look, there was nothing there. Emily's breathing became shallow, and I could see her hands trembling on her lap. "Are you all right?" I asked, glancing at her. "I don't know," she said, her voice trembling. "I just have this feeling, like we're being followed." I chuckled nervously, but the sound felt hollow. "It's just the dark, Emily. We're fine." Suddenly, the radio crackled, and a voice came through, distorted and frantic. "All truckers be advised, there have been reports of strange occurrences along Route 54. If you see anything unusual, do not stop. Do not pick up hitchhikers. They may not be who they seem." My heart sank. "What the hell?" I muttered, gripping the steering wheel tightly. "What did they say?" Emily asked, her eyes darting around. Just a warning," I said, trying to sound calm. But my mind raced with thoughts of what I had just seen and heard. "Sam, please," she said, her voice shaking. "I don't feel safe. Can we pull over?" "No," I snapped, feeling a surge of panic. "We need to keep moving. I'll get you to safety." The fog thickened, wrapping around the truck like a shroud. My headlights barely pierced the darkness, and the road felt endless. I pressed on, my heart racing with fear and uncertainty. Suddenly, I saw something flash in the headlights, an animal, or maybe a person. I slammed on the brakes, the truck skidding to a halt. "What was that?" Emily gasped, clutching her blanket tightly. "I don't know," I said, my heart pounding. "I'll check it out." "Are you crazy?" she shouted. "Just drive." I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself. "I need to make sure it's safe," I said, opening the door and stepping out into the fog. The cold air hit me like a wall, and I squinted into the darkness. I felt exposed, vulnerable. The sounds of the night surrounded me, the rustle of leaves, the distant hoot of an owl, and something else, a low growl that sent chills down my spine. I looked around, my heart racing. "Hello?" I called out, but only silence greeted me. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw movement. A figure emerged from the fog, a silhouette stepping out from behind a tree. My breath caught in my throat. "Sam!" Emily screamed from the truck, her voice filled with panic. I turned to run back, but the figure stepped closer. I froze, my heart pounding. It was a man, dirty and disheveled, his eyes wild and filled with fear. "Help me!" he yelled, his voice frantic. "Please, you have to help me." "What happened?" I asked, torn between instinct and caution. "There's something in the woods," he shouted, glancing over his shoulder. "I saw it. It's hunting us." Before I could respond, Emily shouted again. "Get back in the truck, Sam, now." I hesitated, but the desperation in her voice broke through my fear. I turned and ran back to the truck, climbing inside and slamming the door shut. "What did he say?" Emily asked, her voice shaking. "I don't know," I said, trying to catch my breath. He looked scared, but suddenly the low growl filled the air again, louder this time. I felt the truck shake as something slammed against the side. "Drive! Drive!" Emily shouted, panic in her voice. I turned the key in the ignition, the engine roaring to life as I slammed the accelerator. The truck lurched forward, tires screeching against the asphalt. I glanced in the rearview mirror, but all I saw was fog. "What was that?" Emily cried, gripping the seat. "I don't know," I shouted, my heart racing as I focused on the road. "Just hold on." We tore down the highway, the fog closing in around us. I could feel something lurking just out of sight, watching us. Every shadow felt alive, and my skin crawled with fear. After what felt like hours, we finally reached a small town. I pulled into a gas station, the bright lights cutting through the darkness. I parked the truck and turned to Emily. "Are you okay?" She nodded, her face pale and drawn. "I think so." "What was that thing?" "I don't know," I said, my voice shaking. "But we need to get help." As we climbed out of the truck, I heard a voice calling from behind the gas station. "Hey, you two, come here." I turned to see the man from the woods stumbling toward us, his face twisted with fear. "You have to get out of here," he yelled, his voice filled with urgency. "It's coming." "Who are you?" I asked, confusion flooding my mind. "I was camping too," he gasped, looking back at the woods. "I thought I could get away, but it followed me." "You have to go before it gets you too." Emily grabbed my arm, her eyes wide with fear. "We can't just leave. We need to get help." "Listen to me," the man shouted, his voice frantic. "It's not safe. You don't understand. It's hunting us." Just then, a deep growl echoed from the trees, making my blood run cold. I felt a surge of panic. "Get inside!" I yelled, pulling Emily toward the door of the gas station. We stumbled inside, and I slammed the door shut, locking it behind us. The cashier looked up, eyes wide with confusion. "What's going on?" "There's something out there," I gasped, trying to catch my breath. "A creature, it's hunting us." "Calm down," the cashier said, but I could see the fear in his eyes. "What do you mean?" Before I could answer, the lights flickered, and the growl echoed again, closer this time. I felt a rush of adrenaline as I grabbed Emily's hand. "We need to find a way out of here." The cashier pointed toward the back. "There's an exit through the storeroom." I nodded and led Emily toward the back door, the growling growing louder. The man from the woods was still outside, banging on the door, desperate to get in. "Help me, let me in," he screamed, his voice filled with terror, but I couldn't risk it. I pushed open the storeroom door, and we stepped into the darkness. Boxes were piled high, creating a maze of obstacles. I could hear the growling outside, the sound sending shivers down my spine. "Where do we go?" Emily whispered, panic rising in her voice. "Just follow me," I said, trying to stay calm. "We'll find another way out." We navigated through the maze of boxes, my heart racing. The growling echoed outside, and I could feel the ground tremble beneath us as whatever was out there prowled around. Suddenly, a loud crash came from the front of the gas station. "Let me in," the man yelled again, but the sound was cut short, replaced by a chilling silence. "Sam!" Emily cried, gripping my arm. "What was that?" "I don't know," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "But we need to keep moving." We finally reached a door at the back, and I pushed it open. It led outside, but the fog had thickened, making it hard to see anything. I stepped out, and Emily followed closely behind me. The growling was louder now, echoing around us, and I felt a sense of dread wash over me. I scanned the area, looking for any sign of safety. The gas station was behind us, but there was nothing but darkness ahead. "Where do we go?" Emily asked, her voice trembling. I looked around, my mind racing. "There, the trees." I pointed toward a line of trees not far from us. "We can hide there." As we ran toward the trees, the growling intensified. My heart raced as I pushed through the underbrush, trying to find a place to hide. We crouched behind a large tree, our breaths coming in shallow gasps. I could hear the creature moving through the darkness, its growl echoing in the night. "Sam, I'm scared," Emily whispered, her voice quivering. "I know," I replied, trying to stay calm. "But we'll get through this." The growling stopped, and I held my breath, straining to listen. I could hear rustling in the leaves, and then a shape emerged from the fog. It was massive, hulking and dark, with glowing eyes that pierced through the night. My blood ran cold as I watched it sniff the air, searching for us. "Stay quiet," I whispered, my heart pounding in my chest. The creature moved closer, and I could see its jagged teeth gleaming in the faint light. My stomach twisted with fear, and I could feel Emily trembling beside me. As it prowled through the trees, I could feel its gaze searching for us. I held my breath, praying it wouldn't find us. Suddenly, it stopped and turned, its eyes locking onto mine. I froze, my heart racing as it stepped closer. "Run!" I shouted, grabbing Emily's hand and pulling her away from the tree. We bolted through the underbrush, the creature's growls echoing behind us. I could hear it crashing through the trees, chasing after us. "Faster," I urged, my lungs burning as we sprinted through the darkness. We burst into a small clearing, and I spotted an old abandoned cabin in the distance. "There!" I shouted, pointing. "We can hide in there." We raced toward the cabin, our hearts pounding in our chests. I could hear the creature closing in, its growls echoing in the night. I pushed open the door of the cabin and dragged Emily inside. The darkness enveloped us, and I quickly shut the door, leaning against it to catch my breath. "Do you think it followed us?" Emily whispered, her voice trembling. "I don't know," I said, peering through the cracks in the door. "We have to stay quiet." The cabin was filled with dust and cobwebs, remnants of a life long forgotten. I could hear the creature outside, sniffing around, searching for us. "What do we do?" Emily asked, her voice shaky. I took a deep breath, trying to think clearly. "We wait for it to leave. Then we'll find a way out of here." We huddled in the corner, listening to the sounds outside. The growling was persistent, and I could hear it moving around the cabin, trying to find a way in. "Please go away," I whispered under my breath, my heart racing. Then suddenly, the growling stopped. I felt a chill run down my spine. "What happened?" Emily asked, her eyes wide with fear. I shook my head, listening intently. The silence felt heavy, almost suffocating. "I don't know," I whispered. Just then I heard a scratching noise at the door. My heart raced as I backed away, pulling Emily with me. "Stay back," I whispered. The scratching grew louder, and then the door began to rattle. "It's trying to get in," Emily exclaimed, her voice rising in panic. "Shh," I hissed, my heart pounding in my chest. The door shook violently, and I could see the wood splintering under the pressure. "We have to do something," Emily cried. "Just hold on," I shouted, searching the cabin for anything we could use. My eyes landed on a rusty old axe leaning against the wall. I rushed over and grabbed it, my hands trembling as I turned back to the door. With every shake, I could feel the creature's presence growing stronger. I braced myself against the door, clutching the axe tightly. "If it gets in, we fight," I said, trying to sound confident. The door rattled again, and I could hear the creature growling, its breath heavy and labored. I glanced at Emily, her face pale with fear. "We can do this," I reassured her, though I wasn't sure myself. Then, with a final thunderous crash, the door flew open, and the creature lunged at us. I swung the axe, hitting the beast in the side. It roared in pain, but I could see its eyes filled with rage. "Run!" I yelled, pulling Emily away from the door. We dashed through the cabin, searching for another way out. I spotted a window at the back of the cabin, just large enough for us to squeeze through. "There!" I shouted, pointing. We rushed toward the window and I pushed it open. "Go, I'll follow." Emily climbed through first, her legs scrambling as she landed outside. I heard the creature roaring behind us, and adrenaline surged through me. I crawled through the window, barely making it out before the beast charged into the room. "Keep running," I yelled, sprinting toward the tree line. We bolted into the woods, dodging branches and underbrush as we ran. The growls echoed behind us, relentless and hungry. I could feel the creature gaining on us, its heavy footsteps thudding against the ground. "We need to find shelter," I shouted, scanning the area. In the distance, I spotted a clearing ahead, with a small rock formation. "Over there," I called out, pushing Emily ahead of me. We reached the rocks and ducked behind them, gasping for breath. I peered around the corner, watching as the creature sniffed the air, its eyes glowing in the dark. "Please don't find us," Emily whispered, trembling beside me. The creature prowled around the area, its growl echoing in the night. I gripped the axe tightly, ready to fight if it came any closer. But then something strange happened. The creature paused, its ears twitching as if it heard something in the distance. It turned, glancing back toward the woods, and with a final growl, it bounded away, disappearing into the darkness. I let out a shaky breath, feeling the tension lift for a moment. "Did we lose it?" Emily asked, her voice trembling. "I think so," I replied, my heart still racing. We waited in the shadows, listening for any signs of the creature. Minutes passed, but the only sounds were the rustling of leaves and the distant chirping of crickets. Finally, I turned to Emily. "We need to keep moving, we can't stay here." She nodded, and we cautiously stepped out from behind the rocks, scanning the area for any signs of danger. The fog had lifted slightly, revealing the path ahead. "Let's go," I said, leading the way. We walked quietly, adrenaline still coursing through our veins. The night felt heavy around us, every rustle making us jump. As we continued, I spotted lights in the distance. Houses. "There," I pointed, hope flooding my chest. "We can find help." We quickened our pace, drawing closer to the lights. As we approached, I could see a small farmhouse nestled among the trees. "Maybe they can help us," Emily said, her voice filled with a mix of hope and fear. I knocked on the door, my heart pounding. Moments later, an elderly man opened the door, his eyes widening in surprise. "What in the world happened to you two?" he asked, concern etched on his face. "We were being hunted by something," I gasped, trying to catch my breath. "Please, we need help." The man nodded, stepping aside to let us in. "Come in, you're safe now." As we entered the warm, cozy home, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. We were finally safe. "What were you running from?" the man asked, closing the door behind us. "A creature," I said, still trying to gather my thoughts. "It was hunting us." He frowned, glancing toward the window. "I've heard stories about that thing. Some say it's a lost soul, others say it's a beast that prowls the woods at night." "What do we do?" Emily asked, her voice trembling. The man led us to a small living room, where he offered us a seat. "You stay here for the night. I'll call the authorities in the morning." As we sat in the warmth of the house, I felt my body finally relax. We were safe, at least for now. But deep down, I knew we hadn't seen the last of that creature. The road was a dangerous place, and some things were better left undiscovered. As I drifted off to sleep that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that the creature was still out there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for the next unsuspecting traveler. If you're ever on the road late at night, remember my story. You never know what might be lurking just beyond the fog. Always stay vigilant, and never pick up a stranger, especially in the dark.